Good afternoon, fellow Americans. My name is Mackenzie.
And my name is Madden.
And today you are all members of a jury in a case involving the insanity defense.
In this video, we're going to tell you about what the insanity defense actually entails, a famous example of the insanity defense, some common misconceptions that many people have, and what happens to a defendant after they're declared not guilty by reason of insanity.
The insanity defense looks at the defendant's mental state at the time of the offense and determines if they are criminally responsible for their actions.
Now, here are some definitions to help you out.
The definition of insanity is a legal concept referring to a criminal state of mind at the time the crime was committed. It requires that, due to a mental illness, a defendant lacks moral responsibility and culpability for the crime and therefore should not be punished.
The definition of criminal responsibility is the degree to which an individual is accountable for an illegal act that he or she committed given idiographic factors such as age, cognitive abilities, and psychological functioning.
The standards for the insanity defense differ between states. Some states don't have the insanity defense at all.
The most common standard used in the United States is the McNaughton Rule, and it's used here in California. The McNaughton Rule explicitly states, it must be clearly proved that, at the time of the committing of the act, the party accused was laboring under such a defect of the reason, from disease of the mind, as to not know the nature and quality of the act he was doing, or, if he did know it, that he did not know what he was doing was wrong.
In simpler terms, this rule means that one is insane if because of a disease of the mind they 1. Do not know what they were doing, or 2. Did not know what they were doing was wrong. This rule requires that the defendant had a total lack of understanding.
The burden of proof is on the defense, so it's the defense's job to prove to you that the defendant was not sane at the time of the crime.
Today, people use the terms mental disease or defect instead of diseases of the mind.
For reference, a famous example of a case involving the insanity defense is John Hinckley Jr. versus the United States.
John Hinckley Jr. attempted to assassinate President Ronald Reagan on March 30th, 1981. After the movie Taxi Driver came out, Hinckley became obsessed with Jodie Foster.
He thought that the only way to win her love would be recreating a scene from the movie, which is why he tried to assassinate the president.
He shot and wounded 4 people, including the president.
During the trial, 4 mental health experts testified that he suffered from severe psychological disturbance, most likely paranoid schizophrenia. This is the disease of the mind aspect of the insanity defense.
After much deliberation, the jury found him not guilty by reason of insanity.
The case of John Hinckley Jr. is an example of a successful insanity defense plea.
This is one of the most important insanity cases due to the president's involvement, and it made the public more aware and critical of this defense. What many people believe about the insanity defense is wrong, so it's very important for the jury to understand the realities of this defense.
Many people think the insanity defense is used frequently, in over 1/3 of felony cases. In reality, it's used less than 1% of the time. So a case involving this defense is rare. The media's misrepresentation and sensationalization of the insanity defense and its famous cases is part of the reason why people think it's so much more common than it actually is.
Along the same lines, the public believes that the insanity defense is successful at least 50% of the time. However, when the insanity defense is used, it's only successful less than 25% of the time. So that means, hypothetically, if there were 400 defendants, only 4 of them would use the insanity defense, and only 1 of them would actually be successful. And in these successful cases, both sides would agree with the verdict only 80% of the time.
Some people think that defendants pleading insanity are usually faking it just so they can get acquitted, but a significant number of insanity defendants are diagnosed with a major mental disorder at the time of their psychiatric evaluation. When looking at a large sample of insanity defense cases, 44% of the defendants had a history of prior hospitalization for mental health reasons. It's also very important to remember that when a defendant pleads insanity, they must admit to committing the crime in question, and that completely negates a not guilty verdict. One of the most important things is what happens to the defendant after they're found not guilty by reason of insanity. This is especially important to you today because these are the implications that your decision may have on the defendant.
The public believes that 25.6% of insanity acquittees are immediately released without any condition or a court-mandated requirement to attend an outpatient treatment program.
The actual number of insanity defendants who are unconditionally released is less than 1%.
Following a not guilty by reason of insanity verdict, between 84 and 95% of acquittees are institutionalized by the Commissioner of the Department of Health and Human Services.
These defendants tend to spend much more time hospitalized than they would have been if they were found guilty for their original crime. Many of them spend nearly twice as long in detention.
The insanity defense is more about the safety of the defendant and the public and less about time being hospitalized, so it may not be as beneficial to the defendant as people may think.
Now that you're more familiar with the insanity defense, you're ready to deliberate with the other members of the jury.
Hopefully the information from this video will help you make a more educated decision.
We also hope that this video helped change your perception of the insanity defense as a whole and clarified any misconceptions you may have had previously.
If you're interested in learning more, you can check out the National Alliance of Mental Illness at www.nami.org. You can find law-specific information at www.criminal.findlaw.com.
Thank you for watching and for your participation in the jury today. Have a nice day.